My blood glucose fasting was 21.1. And I went through my phone the other day and I found, because I would take photos of it for myself throughout the whole journey. And I actually was really quiet about going carnivore for at least the first month. And then I just went, I'm telling everybody.
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Meat Medic podcast. Now today I'm joined by my special guest, Christina Mathewson. And Christina is a traveling naturopath, which is a very interesting topic which we're going to get into today. And Christina has a great story of her own, as well as some people that she helps, of course, with their carnivore diet. So Christina, if you're happy to maybe give us your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the health field for probably about 15 years now, 10 of which was as a health coach. And then I upgraded into naturopathy and became a naturopath, a herbalist, a GAPS practitioner, all of those beautiful things, along with becoming a life coach as well, because I saw that there was, it wasn't all just about what you put in your mouth, it was what you put in your mind as well. And so the crossover had to be there in order to be able to give people the long-lasting results that they wanted. And of course, I think probably most people in my field have some experimentation that starts with themselves and their own family, and then it kind of goes out from there. It's usually what brings people into naturopathy. So yeah, that's me, about 15 years in this space of learning and developing over time what works, what doesn't, mindset stuff, how all of that interplays and interweaves with doing the physical actual elements of the work too.
Yeah, and of course you're a traveling naturopath, which is obviously something different. So you do everything, online basically, don't you? Everything's telehealth. How did you kind of get into that? I mean, what made you go into the digital nomad kind of traveling around and so on?
Well, to start with, like, the digital stuff came easy for me because I have 7 children and we homeschool. So for me, my business has always had to fit in the pockets of time that we have. So, I don't necessarily have 9 to 5 hours. I might have a little bit here and a little bit there, and then, some more in the evening. And so that just made so much more sense to be digital versus trying to take up a physical space to do that. And then, some of my children are getting towards adulthood. Well, they are adults, but they're still young enough that they're kind of, still mine for now. And so we were getting to this space as well of going, well, if we want to travel as a whole family. We need to do it now or never. The kids are going to get to the space where they're going to take on jobs and get relationships. And at that point, it's going to be really fragmented and only some of them will come with us. So we were planning on doing that. 2020 was when we actually pretty much sold everything in our house, got rid of most of our furniture. And then April, COVID hit and everything went into lockdown.
Mm.
So we've been ready for this journey for a couple of years now, but finally got on it at the end of last year. So it's been
Yeah.
a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you're just kind of traveling, touring around Australia, and still obviously working from your van. I know you had issues with your van. I've seen your Facebook, your social media posts, of course. I've been following your journey with getting your barbecues out and everything, and certainly looks exciting. Yeah, wow. I mean, gosh, seven kids. That must be a little bit of a handful. Are they at the age now where they're kind of can just kind of sort each other out, or are you still having to be the full-time mum and so on?
I call it now functional. They're functional, helpful. When little kids, like, when they're babies, they want to really be helpful, but they're not very functional at doing it.
Yep.
Now they're functional at being helpful, but their desire to be helpful is less. But they are
Right.
functionally helpful now. So they can help each other. Like, one of my big boys helps my little boy learn to read, and,
Hmm.
that's part of their own learning journey as well. So they are certainly active parts of it. And my husband does do quite a bit of stuff in the background for them as well.
Hmm.
But that frees me up to be able to do this type of work too.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on my show. I mean, with 7 kids, you're obviously digital naturopathy service and so on. I know you're a very busy person, so I do very, very much appreciate it. And hopefully our listeners and viewers are going to get some good information out of today. Um, you mentioned there, of course, that you were going to go and do this whole trip, and then COVID hit. And COVID, of course, put a spanner in the works for a lot of people for a lot of things. But one thing that we really saw with COVID was people almost trying to then reclaim their health.
Mm.
How did that kind of impact you? Did you see an uptake? Did you see a downturn? What was kind of because from your side? Because I know people often seek out naturopaths for various reasons, and we'll hopefully get into that a little bit later on, and the differences between doctors and naturopaths and the approach they take and so on. But um, what I see is people going to see naturopaths, and I ask them, okay, why is it that you're going? And they say, to be listened to be heard, and to kind of reclaim their own health almost. I mean, is that what you found with COVID? Did you see a change there?
I actually saw COVID as a really positive thing in many ways for people starting to take their health seriously. Because one of the things that I certainly put out on my social media was the best thing you can do to prevent having any issues with COVID is to take care of your risk factors now. Those things like if you've already got pre-diabetes, let's take care of that now. If you've got some autoimmune conditions, let's really get on top of those things now so that we can do preventative medicine versus we've got to now save your life because of these health complications that are playing out in the background. And so for me, I saw a lot of people start to do that, as well as wanting to be proactive with having things in their household. So from the natural health perspective, we've got lots of beautiful tools like vitamin C, etc., that can be amazing, but they are slow acting. They're not as fast as your pharmaceuticals are going to be. And so by the time people go, oh, I'm sick, and then they go get the thing or they order the thing that they need, they're well and truly sick by the time they start it. And it's a much slower process. Whereas if you're proactive and you've already got the things in your house and you're already raring to go and you're already taking care of your immune system and your diet and you're starting to think about a healthier lifestyle, then when something does happen, it's a lot quicker and you're already on top of it by the time it, could turn into something that's, not so beneficial for you.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you probably hit the nail on the head there. A lot of people just became very health conscious. They started to realize that, yeah, maybe it was a good idea to try and look after themselves. It's very interesting because even now, still, I don't want to get into the whole mask debate and vaccines and whatever and so on, but even still now, we see very little health promotion in terms of let's modify your risk factors for COVID. Let's get your weight down, let's get your diabetes sorted, let's get your blood pressure down, let's get your vitamin D up. All of these things which we know are associated with worse outcomes. Still, the messaging is almost just entirely wear a mask, get your vaccine, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But and some people watching this probably going to disagree with that. But those modifiable risk factors, we're still not really talking about them, which is just crazy to me.
I think that that's crazy too. And that was the one thing that I was watching a lot of the news stuff that was coming out, the recommendations and the advice. And I was like, hang on, why are you not telling people go to your doctor and make sure that you've got your health sorted the best that you possibly can? Check in and make sure that you're on as point as you can possibly be with your health issues that you might already have, like these pre-existing cofactors that you already have. Like, why are we not handing out free private health advice sessions or PE type of sessions where we're supporting people getting physically active and those types of things? Well, our only recommendation is these.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole heap of tools there that were available but weren't necessarily being advertised or recommended.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And certainly locally with me, my local community was very good. And then we did see physios and EPs, exercise physiologists, gym memberships and so on, gyms. They were getting people involved in the community, free sessions, trying to get them local, get them active and get them moving and trying to reduce those risk factors and so on. But it's a shame it kind of took that community. I mean, in a way, it's good. Community kind of stepped up. And we did certainly see that with COVID. But yeah, it's a shame it didn't kind of come from the government. This real push to this is a great opportunity to promote health. What a great opportunity. We've been handed this on a platter. Everybody, we got this captive audience, the whole world, and yet there was almost nothing. Such a shame.
Exactly. I thought the same too, in the sense that, there was these almost like there was this push to sit home and watch Netflix. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why not have free exercise videos airing on TV? Like, there's
That's
so
it.
much fear that's coming through the television screen. Why not some proactive things? Like, I remember back in the day, and this is like way back in the 80s, where, there would be aerobicize on TV, and, it was totally daggy. But, as a kid, I definitely did it with my mum in the lounge room doing the,
Yeah.
20-minute aerobicize that was there.
Yeah. No,
Like, opportunity.
that's it, absolutely. And I was listening to the other day the Meat Mafia podcast, and they were talking about this. They had a guest on, and they were talking about this, saying, when COVID started, it was the messaging was kind of, go home, stay home, lock your doors, don't interact with people, isolate yourself. Don't kind of go out, and I don't know, like I kind of just feel like maybe we missed a big opportunity there, and we're still missing the opportunity, for that health promotion. Um, I guess that's maybe a good segue into maybe naturopathy and what you do. I mean, you mentioned health promotion a couple of times there. Maybe for our listeners who aren't maybe au fait with what a naturopath does, or I know I have a number of doctors that also listen to my podcast, and they're going to be thinking at this, going, "Oh my gosh, he's interviewing a naturopath. What's going on here?" Maybe you could perhaps explain a little bit about what a naturopath does and why someone might come and see you, and how they might benefit from seeing you.
Yeah, so I think you and I work on similar sort of foundations there in the sense of functional medicine. And when I think about naturopathy or naturopaths, I think about the natural path. Like, my real role is to help you become aligned with what's going to be beneficial for your body. So that's going to be slightly different for everyone, because everybody's got slightly different health backgrounds. They've got conditions that they've previously had before they come and see me. But ultimately, it's for me to help you listen to, what is your body actually needing right now? What is it needing more of? What is it needing less of? And how do we align you back to what is as close to as possible the natural path for you? So that might be using herbs, it might be using homeopathics, it might be using mindset tools, it might be using pharma nutraceuticals, so vitamin C, D, all of those types of things, to help you get that back into balance. But my ultimate goal whenever I'm working with my clients is to get them to the point where we're really taking out all of that type of stuff. We might put it in to start with to get everything balanced and working as it should do. But then over time, if we're working well and we're getting your lifestyle right, whether it be your food, the way that you're managing stress, the way that you're handling other things in your life, if we're working on getting those right, then we should get to a point where we can pretty much pull all of those things out, and we're just relying on the food and maybe some herbs here and there through times of stress to actually help you manage your health situation. Now, that's all dependent on what's actually happened. So if somebody's come to me and they've got Graves' disease and they've already had their thyroid removed, we're never going to get to the place where we can only just rely on the natural things. There's always going to need to be a pharmaceutical need there, because the organ has been removed. We can't repair something that's no longer existent, and sometimes damage is permanently done and we can't repair damage that's been permanently done. But we want to get as close to as possible as much of this stuff out, and you're living your best life, essentially, where you're full of energy, full of vibrancy. Your lifestyle is one that's actually making you feel really great versus one that's bringing you down and you're like, don't want to wake up in the morning, versus, yay, I am awake in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a very good point there. I mean, a lot of people don't experience that. Sadly, they don't wake up in the morning and feel alive and feel great and feel happy to be alive and just jump out of bed, ready to go. They're having to scrape themselves out of the bed, tempt themselves out of bed with the coffee, or a slice of bacon or something, because they're just not ready to start the day. And they go through life, just being unwell. And sometimes they know they're unwell. Sometimes they don't even know they're unwell, which is really sad. It's very interesting that you mentioned there, of course, that your goal is actually to get people off some of these things, some of their medications, perhaps, some of the things certainly that you're starting with them. Because a common criticism that doctors have of naturopaths is this kind of, oh, you just need to take all these herbs and all these remedies, and look, I've just happened to have this pill that's going to fix you, that you can now buy from me. Um, I mean, where do you kind of see that? Do you see that in naturopaths? Do you see that with other naturopaths, or what's the story there?
I absolutely see that in other naturopaths, and it's one of the things that, so in my particular business, I have multiple roles, one of which is to serve my clients in the space of their health. But then the other part of my business is education, and it's really about educating either the public or other naturopaths. And I do mentoring with other naturopaths because the current model that the education system is now for many naturopaths is very much along that line of here's the condition, here's the herb or the supplement that you give based on this condition, and that's basically the end of the journey. Whereas traditionally, naturopaths were about coming back to what is the root cause? Like, what is the driver here? What is the actual thing that's creating this problem? And let's deal with that versus just band-aiding it with herbs or supplements or those types of things. So there's certainly still that massive element of that within the naturopathic field. And this is why I always recommend people is if the practitioner that you're going to work with offers a free 15-minute, 30-minute session, take it and then decide from there if they're in alignment with the way that you actually want to meet your health goals. Because for me, I look at myself and I go, I suck at taking supplements. Like, I am the worst person at taking supplements. If it doesn't come in a food form, I'm probably not going to remember to do it unless there's an ache or a pain that reminds me to do it. And so I have always been of the mind of how do we get that into you via food? Because you're not going to not remember to eat. At some point, something's going to remind you to eat. Even if you're happy fasting most of the time, something's going to remind you to eat. And if I can educate you on what food to get that from, that's going to be a better place to go. But ultimately, that's not everybody's practitioner. Not everybody's practitioner works like that. Just like you would have in your space too, there will be doctors that, are looking at the root cause, that are trying to work out what are the underlying drivers and factors here. But then there are others that have got 15 minutes, if that, in the consult, and they're just trying to get their patient the best result that they can get in that 5, 10, 15-minute session. And so I think this is where we as patients and clients have to be proactive and our own advocates of deciding what do we actually want, how do we want that to be. And I talk about this with my clients as well, that you're allowed to choose the supplement method, you're allowed to choose the herbal method. They're very valid choices, you're allowed to choose them, but do so knowing that they aren't the end solution. They are maybe a part of the journey, but they're not the end solution. So, for example, your thyroid condition is not an insufficiency of these particular herbs. Your thyroid condition is an insufficiency of other things that are going on in your body, that your gut might not be functioning as well as it could, that your adrenals might be out of balance, that, there's something else out of alignment within your system that can be maybe brought back into alignment to give you the best results possible. And it's not a insufficiency of these herbs that are causing it. And so it's about being active participants in our healthcare.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. I think you're really spot on there, and it's very nice to hear you say that, because I know this is a criticism that some people do have for naturopaths, and I know particularly doctors have this issue. Another issue that doctors have with naturopaths is the lack of evidence. Now, I know the work that we both do. Of course, we are somewhat outside of evidence anyway. But I wonder if you could maybe speak to that a little bit, about maybe the lack of evidence and what that means, and your take on that.
Yeah, so from the perspective of evidence, there is some evidence there, right? But our studies are much smaller than what you're going to get from a pharmaceutical type of study. So when we're looking at plant medicine, the research and the funding is not as prevalent or as high. There's not as much money in actually finding out or doing really good research on some of these pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals, as there is with the pharmaceutical companies. And so that's always going to create an imbalance of evidence and research. The other element in that, when it comes to research, is that you can go to 10 different naturopaths and they will prescribe you maybe some similar herbs, but there's always going to be some differences. And usually what will happen is that, let's say you were one of my clients and you had a thyroid condition and there was a couple of other things going on. I'm going to write you a script for particular herbs. Now, those herbs work in conjunction with each other. Now, when we look at some of the research studies that take place, they try to take one herb and study that particular herb and look at how is that affecting the body. Whereas majority of herbalists are not using one herb, they're using them together in co-partnership to create a synergistic effect, which then makes it really, really hard to create a scientific study that's going to actually match that. And so some of it is the way that we practice that actually makes it really hard. Some of it is funding that makes it really hard to actually get, really good quality research and blind studies and all of that type of stuff. We just don't have the resources to be able to do that. We are seeing some, which is really exciting. And I know you're probably following Dr. Anthony Chafee's work that he and one of his mentors are doing at the moment with cancer research and using the carnivore diet as a part of that healing process afterwards. We're starting to see some of that come out, but it takes a long time to get really good qualified research. Like by the time that's done, it's going to be 5-10 years before we start to get research that you and I could go, here is the actual evidential research that what we think and suspect and hope is actually true. And so there's a lot of complications when it comes to getting evidence-based medicine, especially when it comes to that natural space.
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to just nutritional science anyway. Nutrition, when you're in the nutrition space, you look at pretty much all of the nutritional evidence out there. Most of them are not randomized control trials because it's very difficult to do RCTs. If they have if you have a meta-analysis, it's usually a meta-analysis of epidemiological studies or observational studies, which we know are already poor data on the whole anyway. And then people make a meta-analysis and say, well, look, I made a meta-analysis. Aren't I really good with this? Well, no, because you've just kind of done a meta-analysis of garbage studies, garbage in, garbage out, basically. So nutritional studies are very poor anyway. So nutrition is a relatively evidence-free space, I think, as it is. I mean, I guess you'd probably argue, well, the evidence is, or the proof's in the pudding, so to speak. And the evidence, is, well, if people improve, then it's worked, and that's all the evidence I guess you would say you need. But I know it is a criticism that some people have, and I know certainly when I started my lifestyle medicine course, and I got board certified, I remember it's probably still up on my website. I wrote a blog post, basically saying, lifestyle medicine is the only evidence based. Naturopathy doesn't have any evidence, integrative medicine, and so on. And I mean, I've come away since then. I'm a little bit more open minded, I think now. I was a little bit zealous perhaps back then. But it's interesting. You say that, of course, carnivore, because I know that you're a carnivore. I've seen your social media, of course. I follow you. How do you kind of square carnivore with plant medicine and herbs and so forth?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because when we look at it from a plant-based toxin space in carnivore, we look at it from, these plants are going to offer us lots of different plant toxins, their defense mechanisms. And so I think for me, it's about dosage. When we're eating a lot of it, we're getting a big dose of those plant chemicals, which can be really challenging for particular people. If they've got salicylate problems, if they've got histamine problems, if they've got a lot of those particular challenges, that can be a big challenge for them. But when we look at it from a plant-based medicine, we're having a smaller amount. We're having vastly greater, smaller amounts than what we would if we were eating it every day, 3 times a day, maybe 5 times a day. And so I think about it as a dose amount, in the sense that the dose is important. A little bit of something can be good for us. A lot of it doesn't mean that it's really good for us either. And so for me, that's where I come from. And I come from the space of, for a lot of people who come and work with me to start with, their diet and their lifestyle has been the thing that's got them into trouble. And we need to kind of balance some of those things and just support them a little bit so that we can get the diet and the lifestyle back into the place of healing them and helping them get better. Now, that's not the case for everyone. Lots of people can jump straight into carnivore and don't need any herbs or don't need any other sorts of things to actually help them. But then there are also other people who are coming in who are chronically sick and they actually do need some type of support, whether it be pharmaceutical support. And I have clients where I'm working with their doctor and I'm working with them, and we're working together as a team to be able to help them be able to get food in that's actually going to be really beneficial for them in the long term. But then I've got others that come and they just need some extra herbal support, or they need some nutritional support, and as well as doing the diet and the lifestyle stuff. So I think just like anything, it's all relative to where you've come from and what's going on in your body as to what support you actually need in that moment in time.
Mm. Yeah, and I've certainly heard it said a few times as well. People consider, plants are medicine, not food. Basically.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of where you're coming from there. So do you talk to your patients about the carnivore diet, or just diet in general? Or what is it that you kind of talk to your patients about there with food?
Yeah, so when it comes to somebody's come to me, I always think that health is a pick your own adventure, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be at your house feeding your kids, listening to them whine about what they're eating or not eating. I'm not going to be there like cooking the food and chopping it up and doing your grocery shopping and all of that type of stuff. I might be emotionally there to support you, might be jumping on Voxer and actually talking to me and going, oh my God, I'm really struggling with like blah, blah, blah right now. And we talk through that via Voxer. But I'm not going to be there to do it all for you. You have to be the person in your own home that's making these changes. And so you need to pick the adventure that's going to work for you right now. And for some people, they're like me and they're like, let's go hardcore, let's go carnivore. Other people are the slow and steady. They need a really methodical process to actually get them to the place where they need to get to. So I always present them with options. So I say, here's the slow process. Here's what the baby steps that we take to get you where you need to go. Here is the faster one, and you get to pick anything in between that. And you just tell me what you actually want and which method you would like to go with, and I'll support you through that. Because while I love carnivore and I've seen tremendous results in it for myself, but also other people, it's not for everyone to jump straight into. It sometimes takes them a little bit of time to get their head around it and to start to think about even eating meat, because I've had people who have come from the space of veganism, and for them to jump straight into eating a lot of meat is a really hard pathway. Even if they know that that's what they actually need, it's a really hard pathway. And so it might be just a little bit of baby steps to get them to where they start to feel better and they can make better decisions and they can do more things along that. So I always present them with a range of options. It's a pick your own adventure. Choose what's going to work for you, because I know how I work best. You are not the same as me. You are your own individual person. So what's going to work best for me is not necessarily going to work best for you.
No, you're right. And yeah, I mean, vegan to carnivore, of course, is a pretty hardcore switch, in that even if they know that that's what they want to do, it's still hard for people. I had an interview recently, which should be out by the time this is out, with James, who was an ex-vegan and is now full carnivore, and he knew it was killing him, the vegan diet, but it was still not easy, for him to transition. So, how do you get people started on carnivore if that's the route they want to go down? I know what you do because you've told me previously, and I unashamedly have stolen it with my patients. I hope you don't mind, because it's excellent. But for anyone that doesn't know, what's your kind of tips on starting a carnivore diet?
Yeah, so generally speaking, I will get all my carnivore people to do an apple cleanse to start with, which sounds completely ridiculous, but the whole purpose is that for a lot of people who start either keto or start high fat diet of any type, is that they've probably come from a space where they've been eating a lot of low fat options. So they haven't had much fat in their actual diet, and so therefore their gallbladder can get a little bit sluggish. It can not be moving as much as it maybe needs to in order to match what they're actually starting to put in. So I usually get them to do like an apple cleanse, which is basically 3 days of eating 6 apples until you are so glad that you are not eating any more apples after that. And it really is just to give their digestive system a big clean out, but also to get that gallbladder nice and working the way that we want it to, soften anything that's there with the pectin in those apples, and actually get them ready to cleanse their palate and start to jump into it. But my favorite way is to say to them, after this, I want you to go and pick your favorite meats. I want you to pick the things that are like, you can't wait to actually eat, where you're like, is it lunchtime yet? Because I'm getting to have like that salmon. Or is it, dinner time yet? Because I'm having like this roast. And, start with that first week or two being really excited about the things that you get to eat, like full permission to eat whatever meats you actually want to. You don't have to hold back on anything. Jump and dive right in. After that, think about budget and think about how you might manage this more long term. But that first couple of weeks is the hardest if you are not looking forward to the food you're eating, because that's when you're going through your die-off. It's when you're going through your sugar cravings. It's when, you're feeling a little bit lousy, especially in those first 3 to 5 days. And you want to be like excited about the food that you're eating versus, oh, I've just got a can of sardines to eat today.
Yeah,
You can do something like that afterwards.
yeah. I mean, I haven't heard you mention the apples before. Actually, I'll have to look into that. But certainly the eat what you like. That's the bit that I've certainly stolen. I hope you don't mind. Um, I certainly find with a lot of my patients, it's ribeye steaks. I mean, who can't resist a ribeye? And even people that don't like steak, you say the ribeye, and they're like, "Oh yeah, a ribeye, of course, I'll eat a ribeye." and and they just go, "Oh, I can just eat ribeye for a week." I'm like, "Yeah, just go and eat ribeye for a week, and maybe bacon and eggs for breakfast, and then just whatever you want to do after that, just go and do it." But I find it's a good way of getting people into the idea of eating meat, because it's just delicious and it's easy to eat. It's easy to cook. You really can't go that far wrong with it. It tastes great, whatever you do to it. And, just it's got the fat and it's got the protein and it's got the nutrients that we want. And it's just delicious. So people don't mind it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say to them, yeah, like just a week, and then you do a week, and then you do a week. And I think I stole that from you as well. So thank you. But I just thought that was such a good way. So I hope you don't mind. I've stolen that.
Go for it.
So you're obviously carnivore yourself. How did you get into carnivore? Because I know you've got your own health journey as well. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Your health journey is amazing.
Thank you. So for me, I started carnivore 7 months ago, nearly 8 months now. And I started it for a whole bunch of different reasons, one of which my blood glucose was off the charts. So I don't recommend anybody at home following along and doing exactly what I did. Maybe take bits of it, but my blood glucose fasting was 21.1. And I went through my phone the other day and I found, because I would take photos of it for myself throughout the whole journey. And I actually was really quiet about going carnivore for at least the first month. And then I just went, I'm telling everybody. But that first month, like prior to it, I had one blood glucose that I found this week that was 29.8. And I'm like, at that point, I should have been hospitalized on an insulin drip and all of this stuff. But
Yeah.
it was those things that I was like, I need to make an actual decision here. I can't just let this keep going. And I made the decision that I either go to a doctor and get on medication, which for me was like I would be like selling my soul for that. And that's my own personal stuff, or do something completely drastic. And I went back to some of the stuff that I'd done when I had gestational diabetes in that first couple of pregnancies that I had, which was I knew that meat wasn't going to push my blood glucose up, because I experimented like all heck when I had those babies, because I wanted to do the best that I could for them. And I knew meat wasn't going to do that. So I just started with that. And as I went on the journey, I started to learn a little bit more about the term carnivore, because I'd previously been, sort of privy to it and aware of it. And I'd done stuff with clients before that were meat-based sort of diets. So GAPS, for example, is gut and psychology syndrome, gut and physiology syndrome. And it's basically mostly meat that's slow cooked and then some vegetables that you start to bring in over time. You start to add in foods. It's a bit of an elimination diet. But I'd had patients that I'd done that with before, and we'd done the no plant version of GAPS. And we got tremendous results. So for me, I knew about it from that perspective, but I hadn't heard this term carnivore. And once that started to come into my mind, it actually started to make me go, oh, this is even easier than the plant-free version of GAPS. And I could probably manage that, in the sense that during that period of time in my life was coming towards the end of the big bulk of work with COVID. And so, I'd been flat out during that period of time. My husband was the main cook, and like, he can't really cook. He can burn water. And so we were just getting whatever he could eat, because I just didn't have time to actually get in the kitchen and do the cooking and the making. But I knew he could cook a steak, and I knew he could cook some meat for me, and he could bring that in, and I could, keep doing the work that I was doing, and I could be eating. And so I knew that when I'd started to open my mind up to carnivore and letting go a little bit of the GAP stuff, that my husband can do this, which means that I can eat this food, and I know that he's going to be able to do it, and it's going to taste great, and I love meat, so why not just do that? And it was a whole process, and I'm not sure if you went through that process too, of just going, oh, okay, of self-discovery, really, of going, when I go to a restaurant, what do I look for? Do I go, oh, what vegetables are on the plate? No, that's not me. I am like, what is the protein, and maybe what vegetables come with that protein? That's usually how I select a meal at a restaurant. I was like, oh, yeah, my mind always goes to the protein first. Like, that's what I'm hanging out for. It's what I'm looking for. Like, I don't care if there's potatoes and chips and salad on there. I just want the protein. And then whatever that comes with, I might eat that. And so just going through this process of self-discovery, realizing, what does my body actually want? What is it actually asking for? And giving myself permission to actually just go there, which was hard in the sense of letting go of all the knowledge that I had about vegetables and, different vitamins and minerals and what was in each one and all of the other stuff. Like, there's an encyclopedia of knowledge in my head of, what plants have what things in them, and letting go of that and just going, you know what? I'm just going to experiment and try and see what actually happens. And I'll document what's actually happening for me and see if this is helpful for other people as well. And of course, it actually was.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought of it like that, actually. That you go to a restaurant, you go to a cafe, whatever, and you're going out for food, and okay, you look at it and go, well, what do I want? And you're not looking at the vegetables, you're not looking at the size, you're looking at, do I want fish? Do I want, chicken? Do I want beef? And then it's like, oh, what does it come with? I never thought of that. And you're absolutely spot on. You absolutely are. So you had kind of, I know you're a GAPS practitioner, and you've done this no plant kind of GAPS version with people. So you'd obviously seen the benefit, and then you just decided to kind of go carnivore, from your previous experience, of course, with meat during gestational diabetes, being pregnant. Obviously, I mean, for our listeners out there, anyone that knows a blood sugar of, close to 30 is, of course, pretty dangerous. And the standard medical advice would be to go see a doctor, probably go to an emergency department if that blood sugar is 30. That being said, of course, you decided not to, which obviously in your case turned out fine, of course, thankfully. But then you took it on yourself to do this. How quickly did you notice those blood sugars actually coming down?
Very quickly, and this is part of the reason that I've got my little tracking book here. So I've pretty much tracked my blood glucose from the very beginning, as to how quickly it came down. And so I've got a whole record of all of that. So, yeah. I say my first one was 21.1, but I'm actually looking here and it was 22.7 as a fasting blood glucose. But within 9 days, it dropped down to 12.7. So it came down very, very quickly. It stayed around that 12 to 10 for a couple of, about a month and a half. And I've noticed that for me, every month it's come down a point. So now I'm regularly in the fives. And that was the other thing that helped me continue to go, was that I was watching my blood glucose. I knew exactly where everything was going to be, and I could see the pattern of what was actually happening, that pretty much every month I'd drop down into another point and another point and another point. And so I could lean in and trust this is working. I can see that this is actually working. So I didn't have that panic of, oh my gosh, this is not working, I'm going to die, or any of those other things. But also at the same time, I had this other thing that was happening, which was energy was going up. Like, my energy just went through the roof. I didn't need to have day naps anymore, which is kind of where I got to with my blood glucose so high, was that I was like, fully asleep during the day, and struggling to stay awake. And my energy levels went through the roof. My weight started to drop. I started to feel really good. Like all of this other stuff was happening as this was also going down as well. So I've tracked it all.
Yeah. And you've lost 39 kilos. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so far, yeah.
Gosh. And you've been a carnivore for how long now?
7 months.
7 months. So 39 kilos in 7 months. I mean, that's just incredible, really.
231 days.
Yeah, that's just amazing. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you've lost what? So seven months, what's that, about 28 weeks, 39 kilos. I mean, that's almost about a kilo and a half a week,
Yeah.
pretty much.
And some goes up and some goes down, in the sense, like, there's big drops and then sometimes there's no drops. But that's where I always talk to my clients about tracking. Like, I measure myself, waist, bust, all the things. I measure that every week so that I can see what's happening from that perspective. I measure ketones, I measure blood glucose. When I have a BP monitor, I measure those things. Like, I track as much as I possibly can so that I can gain information from that as to what's altering, what's changing, what's impacting my health. And I can tell you, like, because I've done that, I can see that you mentioned earlier that our car broke down, our van broke down. My blood glucose jumped up 2 points when that happened.
Mm,
And that for me was like, oh my gosh, look at how much stress actually impacts my blood glucose and what's happening with my liver and all of those types of things. And if I'd not been tracking that, I wouldn't have known that.
mm,
The other thing is, there's been months where I haven't lost hardly any. I've lost maybe a couple of kilos. But when I've done my measurements, I've lost 5 centimeters off my waist. And that was this conversion between fat and muscle, where I've gained a lot of muscle that month. And if I'd just been looking at the scales, I would have gone, oh my God, this is not working, and be like really sad and upset.
mm.
But I could see that it was working because I was tracking all these other measurements as well.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very good advice for anyone that's doing any kind of diet change to try and lose weight. Is to track those other measurements. You know, waist circumference, chest circumference, these kinds of things. I often go on clothes sizes. It's easier. People don't always have a tape measure, but if your clothes are getting looser, you're losing fat. Basically, it's very, very simple.
I will go with that to an extent, because for women, a lot of women who are plus size will wear oversized clothes already. So it's actually not until it's actually hanging off of them that they start to go, oh, hang on, there's a big difference here.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
If they're a little bit lighter, they will wear tighter fitting clothes. But that's what I found for myself as well. Like, I was like, oh, I can't even see that I'm losing weight, because I was wearing oversized clothes already, to hide my body and all of that. And then it wasn't until I started to wear tighter clothes that I went,
Mm.
oh, okay, now I can start to see that as well.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Words of wisdom, words of wisdom. I guess a lot of what I see is men, and I do see female patients, of course. And yeah, men tend to wear sometimes inappropriately tight trousers and so on. They kind of just hang it underneath the belly, and and so anyway. So I mean, your blood sugars obviously very, very quickly. I mean, within just over a week, didn't quite normalize, but not that far off necessarily, which is amazing. And of course, you felt great. You felt incredible. Um, and you've never were diagnosed with diabetes because you didn't go to the doctor. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, we have, or you have rather, effectively kind of, so to speak, cured yourself, or at least in remission now from what was most likely, of course, type 2 diabetes. Um, and you feel amazing. You look great. I've seen your photos. The change is unbelievable. You've lost like 40 kilos. That's insane. I mean, that's almost as much as some people weigh. And yet, some people on your Facebook page are trolling you, saying that you are going to kill yourself. And I've seen some of these posts are saying that you're really unhealthy. How can you possibly suggest this to people? You shouldn't be posting about this. It's really dangerous. I mean, what do you say to? I know what you said, but what do you say to people like that when clearly this is working for you?
Yeah, so I always find those posts are really interesting because, of course, you've never really gotten anywhere until you've got some haters on your page. So I'm like, come, this is so much fun for me. Um, and I think too, also, I'm in the space of where I'm completely congruent with my message. Like I'm fully believing it. I'm fully in it. I've seen the transformations. I've seen it work in so many different spaces for so many different people that it doesn't actually matter to me what those people say because they're not my people. They're not the people that I'm speaking to. And maybe one day they will actually be those people, but right now they're not. And so for me, it doesn't bother me when people ask those questions and say those things. And sometimes I actually use them as methods of content. Like they provide me with great questions to actually go, great, I'm going to do a YouTube video on this because this is the question that people ask me about, which is fiber. I'm sure you get asked about, but what about fiber?
Mm.
All the
Oh
time.
yes, fiber.
And
Yeah.
I'm Awesome. This is a great conversation. Thank you for like bringing this to my mindset so that I can remember to answer this for people. And I try and take it from that perspective, and that I remember as well that even for me, like when I sit back and I was thinking about going carnivore and I just had an innate knowing that this is what I needed to do, even then I was still bumping up against my own educational knowledge that I'd been, given for so many decades of my life about the food pyramid. And then, with nutritional studies, like, these, we need these much vegetables and we need this, so we need that, and we need fiber and we need all of these other things. So, I kind of try and give them the grace that they're still in that space of not yet breaking out of that type of thinking, that they haven't been able to move past it at this point, and they need some evidence, which is again why I actually share my journey, because I want to provide people with the evidence of it. And I always have a little bit of a laugh. Every so often I'll put into a post, when I'm sharing about how much weight I've lost and how well I'm doing. Not dead yet. um, I always have a little bit of a laugh and a play with those things, because it really is the people who are looking for alternative solutions that have tried everything. And that, as a naturopath, is usually who I get. I usually get people who have done the run of the mill of everything that they can find out there, and they come to me as their last resort. And, I usually go, well, if I'm your last resort, let's try something wild. Let's try something
Mm.
you've never tried before and see what might actually happen. And that kind of excites them as well. So I just keep thinking about, these are the people that I'm talking to. And if enough of us actually start to normalize it, then it will become part of the norm, that people are much more accepting and much more open to actually looking outside of the box. But it also provides us with that opportunity to break some of those myths, like, of course, the cholesterol myth, which always comes up. People always go, but what is your cholesterol like? And I'm like, I don't really care what my cholesterol is like. All of these other things, like the 5 factors of heart disease for me, are all reducing. All of that's coming down. So, for me, I don't really care what my cholesterol's like. But, if you want to know, here's some great stuff. Paul Mason does some really great videos on it. There's lots of great information on it. Dr. Natasha has written a book on it. Put your heart in your mouth. There's loads of good information out there that you can get where you can learn a little bit about that. So I kind of try and look at it from that point of view.
Mm. Yeah, we see this quite a lot. And it comes often from doctors, unfortunately, not being able to see the wood for the trees, or see the forest for the trees. We see people that have cured their diabetes, they've cured their hypertension, they've got off all these medications, their kidney functions improved, their liver's normalized, they no longer have metabolic syndrome, they're losing a ton of weight, they feel amazing, and their LDL goes up by zero point 0.1, and then the doctors say, right, well, now you need a statin, and you're going to die. You need to stop this diet. And the patients are looking at them just like, what is wrong with you? you, it's like, do you actually hear yourself? Like, I've told you I'm doing this well, and all you can say is, well, you're harming yourself. Like, it's just crazy, isn't it? But I think it just shows this cognitive dissonance that's out there. And I mean, so many of my guests have said exactly the same thing. They've been doing amazing. Everybody's just like, wow, you look so good. You're so healthy. What are you doing? I must get on this diet. It's so amazing. They tell them, oh, I'm just eating meat, and it's like, no, you're terrible, and you're going to die. It's like it's this crazy dissonance there. But we've even got people. I mean, you mentioned, of course, cholesterol. We've got people like Dr. Paul Mason, of course, doing amazing work in the cholesterol space. Anyone that doesn't know who Dr. Paul Mason is definitely should get onto his YouTube channel. He's got videos on low carb, down under, and so on, doing amazing work there. And I've learned a lot from Dr. Paul Mason. We've got people like I think it's Dr. Philip Ovadia. I believe he's in the States. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon, I believe. Hopefully, I'll get him on the channel at some point. And if I reach out to him, hopefully he'll accept. And he wrote this book. What's it called? Get Off My Table, I think it's called. And he's a cardiothorac surgeon saying, animal-based nutrition is very good for you. Don't worry about cholesterol and so on. And this guy deals with it day to day, and then we've got other people like Dr. Gary Fettke, orthopedic surgeon, Professor Tim Noakes in South Africa, and so on, of course, talking about this cholesterol. But it's crazy to me, like cholesterol, we have to accept that cholesterol is associated with heart disease. There's lots of studies that show that. If you say it's not, well, you don't really know what you're actually talking about. But of course, we know that correlation doesn't equal causation. And in fact, in some populations, it's been found to be protective. So if it's protective, there's absolutely no way it can be causative. That the two things can't coexist, basically, in my opinion, anyway. Someone proves me wrong, fine. But in my mind, they can't coexist. Yet we see it time and time again. Just LDL cholesterol has become the end point. I got a letter from a cardiologist recently about a patient that said, basically, it doesn't matter what we do as long as his LDL is below 1.5. Like that was the endpoint. It wasn't like, oh, we need to fix his heart disease. It was, no, we just need to get his cholesterol down. It's just like, okay, like,
Well,
okay,
and that's
fine.
the thing too, is like I think about from the perspective of like if you were doing a differential diagnosis on somebody, you don't just take one thing in their blood panel and create the diagnosis around it. You look at all of the different patterns. You look at the different elements that are going on. Oh, yes, we can see that there's a pattern of here. You've got some symptoms that are matching that pattern. Now we can create some differential diagnoses based on that. And so why is this one marker in cholesterol any different? That this one thing where we're just looking at the one thing, but everything else seems to be fine. Everything else is going well. The client is saying to you, or the patient is saying to you, I've got energy. I'm feeling great. I've not felt this good in a really long time, if ever in my life. But we still take this one thing that's on there and go, okay, that's going to kill you.
Yeah.
I'm like, when did we make that change? Like,
yeah. Well, it was about 50 years ago with Ansel Keys and and the diet hypothesis. It's pretty clear when that started. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we take this one thing, blow it, out of all proportion, and completely ignore the patient in front of us, and say, well, we need to take this one thing. I had a conversation with a patient recently. They were put on a statin a couple of years ago. They're only like 30 something, very, very young, early 30s. And, I went back through their cholesterol. The LDL was like 4. It was like 1 above the reference range, 2 maybe at most. And they had no risk factors, no family history, nothing. And yet they probably had metabolic syndrome, but, and I've diagnosed them with that now. But, really a statin wasn't warranted at all. And there was no attempt to actually help the patient to reduce their cardiac risk factors. It was just go on a statin. And the patient didn't want it. They felt terrible. They came to me and I said, they just came in, standard thing. Oh, I'm just here for my prescription, and then kind of 45 minutes later, they're leaving happy. All because I asked them the question, why are you taking it? Like,
yeah,
what is this for? And they're like, I don't know, just high cholesterol. Like, okay, but why do you have high cholesterol? Let's look at your other risk factors and let's go through the evidence. And, basically they were like, well, yeah, I never wanted to take it in the first place. It makes me feel terrible. I don't want it. And they weren't told about the risk of diabetes. They weren't told about the risk of coenzyme Q10 going down. They weren't told about, the side effects and so forth. And there was no attempt to educate them on metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, any of these other risk factors. It was just go on a statin. Anyway, I'm conscious of time. Is there anything? I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation, and hopefully, our viewers listeners have got value out of this because I was really looking forward to talking to you today because I really wanted to kind of delve into that little bit between doctors and naturopaths because we know there is this turf war, which is sad because everybody's just trying to do the best for their patients, their clients. And I believe personally that most naturopaths, functional medicine doctors, integrative medicine doctors, and conventional medicine doctors, um, we probably have more similarities than we have differences.
I agree with you there. Like I agree with you there as well. And I think that we also have different functions too as well. Like, for me, what is it, 10 years ago now, if there weren't doctors and surgery and blood transfusions and all the things, I wouldn't be here today. Like, I had a pregnancy where I had placenta prurita. So my placenta had eaten all the way through my uterus into my bladder and my, major blood supply. So if emergency medicine was not there, I would not still be alive. So I'm not like absolutely against all of it. Like, there is absolutely a need for it, as well as there's a need for looking at some of the other things that maybe chronic and lifestyle medicine does a little bit better with, when you have the time to actually sit down and talk with clients. And that was one of the things that you mentioned earlier on in this conversation for me, was that, one of the reasons people come and see naturopaths is because they have an hour and a half. Like, our first consult together is an hour and a half. They get to share everything that they've been through. While they're talking, I'm listening for different cues about what's happening for them on a mental and emotional and a physical level, and starting to piece together that scenario for them. And that doesn't necessarily always happen in a doctor's office. Like, I can just imagine the bill, how much that would
Wow.
actually, to be there for an hour and a half with them. And then, that's just one element, but also too, looking at it from multiple different levels. Like, for me, I don't always just look at it from the physical level. I'm looking at, okay, so here's what's happening with your thyroid and your adrenals, and here's what's happening with your liver and those types of things. But then I'm going, okay, so where did you learn that you weren't allowed to talk in your life? Because they've got a thyroid condition. So that for me tells me their energy has been blocked off at their thyroid. So I'm going to ask them questions around that, which then starts them on a roller coaster of being able to unpack the emotions that are keeping them doing the things that are sabotaging their life. And so it's a bit more expansive than just looking at the physical element, which I'm absolutely sure a lot of functional medicine doctors do as well. But that's because they look for things slightly different even than just the straight allopathic medicine model as well. And I think that there's a place for every part of this medicine. I work with oncology doctors all of the time to help their oncology patients eat really well, to be able to prevent, some of the follow-on effects that can happen from radiation and chemotherapy. So we can work together really well when we work as a team, and we recognize that we have different roles within that, but also recognizing that health for me is more than just your physical body. It's your mental and emotional space as well. And if one of those is out, you're not really healthy anyway.
Mm. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, I obviously a board certified lifestyle physician, and a big part of what I do, of course, is looking at the mental health as well as the physical health, the sleep, the social relationships, our diet, nutrition, smoking cessation, drugs, etc. Obviously, lifestyle medicine promotes a plant based diet. I don't obviously promote that, being a carnivore myself and talking to patients about carnivore, but I definitely, of course, advocate for a whole food diet. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem with allopathic conventional medicine is time. I really do.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
I think it's multiple in the sense that, the system has been set up for there not to be much time, but also sometimes the patients come in with that ethos as well, that I just am here for my script and so on. So I don't necessarily think that it's the doctor's doing. I think it's actually a whole facet of, the system, how our patients have been educated to actually deal with the system, and all of that needs to kind of change in order to be able to create the really great results that we're actually all after.
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And the system, the whole system, is kind of broken. And of course, here in Australia, of course, we have Medicare, the state insurance system, who basically penalize and punish if the doctors if they do longer consultations.
Mhm.
They're essentially robbing patients of their rebates if they do longer consultations, which drives it to these short consults. I mean, what can you really do in 15 minutes? I mean, you're talking about an hour and a half, and I usually have like a 45-minute consult for new patients, especially for the carnivore patients and functional kind of patients. Really, it goes to an hour anyway, pretty much. And even that's not enough. It's just barely scratches the surface. When I do my psychology work, usually it's maybe like six sessions at least, depending on how the patient's going. Sometimes it's just one, and it's just great. I help them, and they're off they go, and they're fine. Um, but that's usually 6 1 hour sessions. I mean, that's like 6 hours. What can you do in 15 minutes? For someone with mental health issues,
Exactly.
for example, when you've got then
Exactly.
a psychologist or a psychologist or practitioner like me, doing 6 hours worth of consults at least, typically, but it's fascinating actually. I mean, I talk to patients about carnivore diet and animal-based nutrition in those psychology sessions as well, assuming they're happy to talk about it. And very often they report they get better mentally, which is just incredible.
Well, exactly. And I would say for myself, like, I briefly touched on that pregnancy that I had afterwards. Like, it took me 8 months to be able to rebuild my energy to the point where I could walk around the supermarket on my own and, not be monitored like a child to make sure that I hadn't fallen down or passed out in the supermarket. So that took a long time. But that I knew that I needed to eat meat to get to that space. Like it was the only thing that I wanted to eat was the only thing I actually craved after that experience to get myself back up. And I'd used 178 units of blood. So, I lost a lot of blood through that process and I needed a lot of, rebuilding of my body after that. And I always joke because there was one moment in time when none of the blood in my body was actually my own. It was all donor blood.
Yeah,
And so when people ask me, like, how did you get this sick to start with? Well, there was some significant trauma that took place to get there, as well as, busyness and having 7 kids and running a business and so on. And that takes a journey to actually undo and actually process mentally and emotionally all the physical stuff that takes place during that.
yeah. Gosh, I'm kind of stunned. 178 units of blood.
Yeah. I used all of Tasmania's available O negative blood, and then I used half of Melbourne's.
Wow, that's insane. Gosh, I'm kind of stunned actually with that. I'm almost speechless. I mean, I remember back in junior doctor days, we had a patient coming in hemorrhaging from the GI tract, and I remember it was terribly exciting. Obviously, not for the patient, of course, but and they did fine. They did fine. And I kind of, we had this kind of almost like big red button, kind of the emergency hemorrhage kind of protocol. I can't remember the exact name of it now. And you kind of hit this. It wasn't really an actual button, a metaphorical button, but you'd call the team and you say, right, I'm activating the massive hemorrhage protocol. I think that's what it was called. And oh my god, it was like crazy. Like everything just like goes crazy. Like everything stops. The whole hospital kind of shuts down, almost, and like everyone's just going like just rapid fire everything. Stuff just happens. Like you don't even know what's happening. It's just crazy. And that patient ended up having something like eight units, I think, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, 8 units! Oh, that was like the worst ever." And there you are having 178. Oh my god, that's insane. I mean, obviously you
Not a competition,
no.
but I win.
I think you win for all history almost there. Gosh, I mean that really must have taken a toll on you. I mean, you said 8 months it took you to recover. I'm not
Absolutely.
surprised.
And it yeah, it took a big toll, but it also then meant, that taxed my adrenals, it taxed my thyroid, it taxed all of my organ areas. And, I think probably for me, I just did a video on it that like I developed incontinence after that because I had to have like parts of my bladder reshaped and moved and so on. And now I've got kidney reflux and I've got damage to one of my kidneys. And for me, part of sharing my story is to be able to say, look, I've even had these things happen to me and I'm doing brilliantly on this. Like, I don't have incontinence anymore. And I thought I would have that for life because I thought, this was a surgical thing that's created this. I'm going to have it for life. It, I only ever get that back if I've had a slip up and I've had something that's had a bit of sugar on it. Other than that, I have not had anything in the last 6 months since, switching over to carnivore and my blood glucose starting to come down. And the same with my kidneys. Like I used to get kidney pain all of the time. I haven't had a kidney spasm in like that whole time that I have been carnivore, which is one of those things that people go, oh, you've got to be really mindful of protein with, kidney stuff. Hello, I'm over here and my kidneys are doing beautifully. Like all of these things are actually resolving themselves. and stuff that I didn't even think would actually get better, like eyesight. I used to have to wear glasses 100% of the time to be able to function in my day. I don't even know where my glasses are right now because like it's been so long since I've actually put them on and needed them to actually read and do my life that I don't even really know where they are. They're somewhere in my van. But, you know, even that's changed. My hair has grown back. Like I lost during that surgery, they did things like chemotherapy to me. They tried to chuck everything that they could to save my life. And chemotherapy was one of those. I lost big chunks of hair. Well, my hair has grown back and it's like double the thickness that it was since starting carnivore. I even have to cut my hair more now. And so, you know, that's a celebration, but also, oh, yes, I'm celebrating that. I'm not going to say that there's anything bad about that. I can spend a little bit more on the hairdressers. But, you know, there's so much that's changed that I didn't even think was actually possible. I started for my blood glucose, but all of this other stuff has been beneficial side effects.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely noticed a lot of those issues, you know, with that I had. I didn't even know were issues, honestly. I mean, I've done videos and episodes speaking about like my IBS and so on, and things that like my thumb pain. Like, I just resigned myself to these are just going to be issues for the rest of my life. Just disappeared. It's crazy. Like, it's saying that you know, you're even like kind of post surgical issues that were there, and that you probably, I'm assuming you were just told, well, this is forever now. It's surgical. Deal with it.
Yeah, this is the best it's going to get.
They're they're gone on carnivore. Like, that's crazy.
Absolutely. And those that like, you know, for any woman who's out there or any man who's out there that's listening and going, oh my gosh, I'm suffering from incontinence, you'll know how embarrassing that is and how horrible that experience can actually be. And also, just like, you know, with the kidney reflux, I couldn't hold my bladder. Like, if I held it, I was going to get kidney pain. So I just needed to go. And having to know that there's a toilet nearby, like, and you're in the middle of busyness and life is a pain in the backside.
Mm.
And so being able to let go of those things, not being able to go, I don't need to worry if there's a toilet nearby. I know I'm going to be fine. I know I can manage this. I'm not going to wet myself. I'm not going to have kidney pain. Any of those types of things all add to quality of life, which is the fundamental importance to me, is being able to improve the quality of my life, but also my family's life.
Mm. No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned hair, of course. You noticed your hair regrew a lot. Certainly, some people do notice that. I've still not got huge amounts, but I do feel like it's regrowing, slowly. But I do feel like it's regrowing, and certainly I had a little bald spot underneath my chin here. That's definitely grown in now. But I certainly noticed my hair grows a lot more, definitely in terms of the rate, not necessarily the volume or the thickness, but the rate definitely. I have to cut my hair like 3 times a week to keep it looking somewhat respectable. It's just ridiculous. I have to trim my beard like every day. Otherwise, it just looks so overgrown. And I noticed that changed dramatically with carnivore, which is definitely interesting, of course.
I
Um,
had to do a big cut of my hair because my hair was down to about here, and you could see where I'd started carnivore because I had like this big mass of hair here, and then it was really thin here. So I just had to do a big cut so that it was all even because
really,
you could tell like where my hair had started growing back from carnivore, and I used to have like this massive bald patch there, and that's all kind of grown in now, and there's all, you know, hair coming through there too.
yeah.
So I like to say that because there's a lot of women in my age group or above that have gone through menopause or are going through menopause that their hair really starts to thin at that stage, and they think that's never coming back, and they start to have to buy wigs and all sorts of other things. And for me, it's really encouraging I didn't expect it was going to happen, but it absolutely did happen. And it's encouraging to be able to say to them, hey, you probably need a little bit more protein. Even if you're not going carnivore, maybe can we start to look at adding a bit more protein and a bit
Mm.
more fat into your actual diet? And just see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very good advice there. I mean, I can obviously assume, but I'll let you answer. Where is it that you're going to from here? Are you planning on staying carnivore? Is there anything that would stop you staying on the carnivore diet?
So at this point in time, I always have an asterisk, which is I reserve the right to change my mind at any time.
Yep.
But my intention at this point is that I'll probably be carnivore for life now. Now, there is a part of me that sometimes dances with the idea of like when I've reached all my health goals and I'm really healthy and well, that maybe I could bring in a little bit of fruit here and there and be a bit more keto. But if I'm really honest, I don't think that I'll be able to manage that at this point in time. Like with the addiction that I have to carbohydrates, the likelihood is that that would send me into a spiral where I would find myself backtracking. And I don't want to do that. So for me, it's easier just to kind of go, nope, never. Maybe on the day that I die, if I'm going to die and I'm on my deathbed, I'll be like, bring me the pavlova and the strawberries. But other than that, at this point in time, that's not my intention. My intention is to stay carnivore unless something changes. Like if I get to a point where this is not working for me anymore, then I might actually make some changes and actually start to tweak it or play with it. But from right now, from the space where I'm sitting, this is probably for life for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm exactly the same. I reserve the right to change. You know, if at any point it stops feeling right, I'll make that change. If my bloods go off, whatever, like I'll make that change. But yeah, same thing for me. I toyed with the idea maybe of fruit, but then I kind of look at it in the fridge and I'm like, yeah, I still don't want it. If I don't want it, I feel like my body doesn't need it. So I'm not going to go and then mess with it. And I know I'm addicted to carbs completely, and I know what would happen if I go down that route. I'm going to go back to square one. I'm going to end up back at 108 kilos again. You know, putting 40 kilos on again, and yeah, I don't want to be back at that point.
Well, I did it for Christmas. So, I had the whole thing of like, well, it's Christmas Day. I'll pick one thing. And I picked my favorite, which of course is pavlova. And so on that day, I had my piece of pavlova and I was happy as a pig in mud. And then the next day, I was like, oh, I really want to eat more now. And it actually wasn't until that moment that I realized how significant my own carb addiction and sugar addiction actually is, because it took a full 2 weeks to actually get myself out of that space. And I started to get an inkling of what it must be like for somebody who's coming off heroin or cocaine or alcohol. Because, like, I could have peeled my skin off with how, I had to keep myself so busy to try and keep my mind off of this food. And I had to do what I usually do is jump straight into what are my favorite meats. I need to go and, buy the things that I really love to eat so that I can just keep myself full and satisfied so that there's no room for any of these things. And then, within about 2 weeks, that had died down again. And it was like a really good lesson to learn. But I hadn't really realized how much of an addict I was until that moment, because I was always a savory girl. You're going to give me steak or cake, I'll take the steak any day, except for when I'm in a sugar craving high. And I was totally there at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I always said the same. I'm a savory person. Same steak, cake. I'll take the steak, but yeah, I still have a really bad sugar addiction. And that is a great example you shared there. And it took you 2 weeks almost to actually get over that.
Mm.
I mean, that's just the power that these foods have, that sugar has. You know, it really is addictive. And of course, we know there's studies. To be fair, it's rat studies, mice studies, etc., but showing that it's more addictive than cocaine. You know, like
And I think it's socially acceptable as well. Like,
yeah,
if you're an alcoholic, you can avoid most of the places where alcohol is. You can choose not to go to the pubs and the clubs. You can choose not to go into the bottle shop. But if you are a sugar or a food addict, you can't avoid it. You can't not go to the supermarket unless you order everything online, but then you're still seeing it while you're doing that ordering process. Like, you can't avoid it. And so I think sometimes that means it's a little bit harder to kick, but also it's socially acceptable. Nobody's like, losing their marriage because they're 40 kilos overweight, but they might be losing their marriage because they're addicted to alcohol. But the ramifications can be somewhat similar to their
mm,
life and their health.
absolutely right. And of course, unlike with alcohol, yeah, like you can avoid that a little bit easier if you're addicted to cocaine, meth, anything like that. Of course, and we're not advocating for taking those. Then of course, yeah, you can avoid those a little bit easier. But with sugar, you go to the supermarket, every single aisle almost is just sugar. and it's brightly colored and it's attractive and it's always on special. And you get around the whole shop and maybe you manage to avoid it. And then you get to the counter and what's there? Sugar. And you leave the shop
Yep.
and what's on the ads outside? Sugar. What's on the ads on the TV at home? Sugar. It's everywhere and it's such predatory marketing. It's so hard to avoid. And of course, it's socially acceptable. I had a GP on not long ago talking about, when they went out for dinner with their friends and they just saw these, dessert and just, of course you go out for dinner, you must eat dessert. And it was like deep fried ice cream. And it's like, just sugar overload. And yeah, it's totally acceptable. If that person was having deep fried cocaine, like probably people are going to look and say, what the hell are you doing? But sugar, no, it's absolutely fine. This has been an amazing conversation, Christina, and I am conscious of time. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't spoken about so far?
I think if there was anything to add that the one thing that I would add is that, first of all, one of the things that I see is a lot of women need permission to eat meat. They've been given this philosophy that it's bad for them, that, they shouldn't eat it, etc., etc. Give yourself permission to lean into it and try it. And if you're listening to this or any of the other videos or podcasts that have been created around these topics, experiment with yourself. Like, definitely do it with the supervision of a doctor if you've got medical conditions that need that. But start by playing and actually exploring what actually works for you and how that might work for you. Don't be scared to step outside of the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And how can people find you? Because, of course, you're a digital nomad, so you could be anywhere in the country. And I won't ask you where you are now for security reasons and whatever. But how can people find you, social media and so forth? If they want to come and see you or telehealth with you or so on, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm even on TikTok. Just put in Christina Mathewson and you'll find me there somewhere. But also you can find me on YouTube where I'm sharing my journey and some of the bits and pieces of information that people want to know about carnivore along the way, which is basically the carnivore naturopath Christina. That's me.
Yeah, and you of course do the carnivore conversations, which I
Yep.
was on, of course. So if anyone searches for that, they'll probably find you as well. Obviously, I'll make sure to put all the links in the description so people can come and find you. Thank you so much, Christina. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I was really looking forward to getting you back on my channel, or getting you on my channel rather, so we could have this conversation. And hopefully, our viewers and listeners out there have got good value from this. And hopefully, there's doctors there listening as well, thinking maybe I've been a bit hard on naturopaths, perhaps, and maybe we've got more in common than we realize. Thank you so much, Christina. And I'll let you go. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of the Meat Medic podcast. We'll see you guys in the next episode.